Luc Longley is a guy you couldn't miss. And he's 7'2". If he stood in front of you, you wouldn't see the sun. He's an enormous character.
My size came from mum and dad. Dad's 6'10", mum's 6'4". I was always going to be big.
Everybody stares because he's that much bigger. Kids will open mouth, you know, and parents will pretend they haven't seen him, but they will, and you know, they'll get back in the car and go, "You would not believe what I saw. I saw a genuine giant today. He's huge, like his head was going up the top over the supermarket shelves."
Being tall has ergonomic challenges for sure. So I'm always redesigning cars and boats and houses to fit my size. Beds, have to get custom-made beds. Clothes when I was a teenager. Shit, I just was so embarrassed by the clothes that I could wear. Oh, there we go. There weren't very many choices.
Oh, look at that.
Actually gets me in the shoulders, just not quite in the arms.
Yeah.
It makes me furious now. I look at the teenagers and their jeans are all halfway up their calves, because that's cool. Well, mine were like that in the 80s and 90s, but it wasn't cool.
Long before I knew how he'd processed his fame and his great success and the riches he made, I admired how well he'd processed being what he termed a giant, a freak.
I remember once we went out to this pub and the bouncer starts yelling out at Luke, "Get off the bloody chair or I'll kick you out of here." And Luke, you know, very graciously, "I'm sorry, mate, I'm not on a chair." Anyway, the bouncer comes over and goes, "Jesus Christ."
I wouldn't trade it. I like being tall. It's certainly got me a long way in basketball. No, I wouldn't have been anywhere near the NBA if I hadn't been 7'2". I'm a realist about that.
Luke had a gift given to him by the maker upstairs. But he took the leap, and all of his success was through his own doing. Luke did all the hard work. Luc Longley was the pioneer for basketball in Australia in the sense that he was the first to go to the NBA. And he remains the only Australian to win multiple titles in the NBA. He was the starting centre for 3 years on the greatest team of all time.
The Chicago Bulls have won their 6th NBA championship, and it's their second three-peat.
There was nothing like the Chicago Bulls of '96 to '98. I don't know what you would compare it to the Beatles in the mid-'60s, the Rolling Stones when Mick Jagger was at his height. That may never come along again for centuries. You may never, ever see anything like that. We won't.
I felt that Luc was a little bit of a fish out of water coming into the culture, the NBA culture.
Luc was a very gentle, nice person by nature. To be more of an intimidator, to knock somebody down. None of that was Luc's demeanor.
I was a gentle and empathetic young kid who had to figure out how to discard some of the gentleness and adopt some MJ, if you like.
I don't think Luc had the mentality of what it took to win. And, you know, you want to see that frustration, you want to see a little bit of anger. You want to dominate, you know, and there's times where I had to push him on that. You had to show him a little tough love. You know, that's what I call it, tough love.
He took a lot of heat from Michael, but he was also respected by Michael. So he fit right into the group and became a mainstay, you know, for that entire era.
I feel like basketball's given me an awful lot, and it's also cost me a fair bit in a lot of ways. I had to change an awful lot of who I was in order to really do the job. And coming out of that, I think I learned that not all of that suited me very well. And it's taken me quite a long time to acknowledge that, quite a long time to unpick it, and I'm still unlearning it. Sounds like the first question in a session with a psychologist, doesn't it? Tell me about your childhood. I grew up in Fremantle. At that stage was an interesting port town. It has a combination of a fishing village and then starting to be occupied by sort of alternative people. It's a different Freo to the one we grew up in.
Isn't it just?
It has been 30 years since they cleaned Freo up.
Yeah.
So I'm the eldest of 3 boys. We tend to run a bit as a pack. Do you want me to get like a wheelchair, a chair or some special device?
No, I'm all good, thank you, bro.
Okay.
We lived in what was essentially a warehouse building, and we were the first family in that part of town. We grew up around artists and academics and architects. I remember going to the Sail and Anchor at lunchtime in our school bags.
It was a different time.
You can count on grip.
There were no kids to play with, it was just us boys. And so, as boys will, we roamed everywhere. One minute we're at the end of a jetty spearfishing, the next minute we're climbing up a roof in a warehouse. It was very different. It was unusual.
I definitely grew up a gentle person. I wasn't a tough kid, didn't need to be. I was more of a creative kid. Grew up in a relatively creative environment. Dad and Mum were alternative, but I mean, Dad was an architect. They weren't full hippies, but they were definitely doing something different to any other kid I knew. I suppose I was a bit destined. I mean, I grew up on basketball courts. Mum and Dad were good basketballers.
They both played, and they played at really high levels, particularly Dad. He had a really quite an extraordinary career in his time.
When I was pregnant, I would be at Richard's basketball games, and I often wondered if the pounding of the ball and the running of the feet on the court kind of went into him in utero in some way.
He saw what I was doing, so it was almost a fait accompli.
Luc was identified pretty early as having considerable basketball talent, and he was picked for the under-14s team when he was about 12. But he was dropped because he'd been fooling around in practice.
I was that kid that was never that reliable because it wasn't big on the palette of things. I wanted to be an underwater architect. I was busy thinking about that.
First time I saw Luc play basketball was at the Australian Under-18 Championships in Queensland. He would have been about 16 years of age at that time, and he was very tall and awkward, but you could see enormous potential. And so I recruited him to come to Canberra the next year on a scholarship.
The Institute of Sport basketball program is dedicated to young people like these to give them the opportunities to play for Australia and further their basketball career.
I think one of the pivotal points when Luc was young was the separation of his parents. He was visibly affected, was confused, was angry, and I think he became overnight independent, grew up, had to, and felt like he was going to take the next steps by himself, and that's when, he went off to the institute.
I thought that he really was going there because he wanted a bit of distance and to sort of just not be quite so close to the chaos that was happening at home.
When you're in a family that's splitting, you don't know what the rules are anymore. Whereas in a game, everything is laid out for you so that you know exactly what's going on.
I never planned for basketball to be a big deal in my life. I didn't expect that it would be. I stumbled into it. However, it provided me with a family when mine was broken down. And I think that became my sort of loving focus almost. Like that's what I sort of poured myself into.
Anyone who's 7 foot tall and pretty well coordinated, you'd have to say, had a very big chance of being a very good basketball player. And that was my take on him. The question mark was whether he'd have the attitude and determination and will to excel at the game.
I wasn't serious. I wasn't down in the gym like all the other guys. People around at that stage would have said, oh, he's not going to make it, he doesn't want it badly enough.
I would say Luc is an accidental superstar. He was never driven to be a basketball person. We both went to the US for college, and I like to think I had a little bit of a hand in how he got there because New Mexico were recruiting me at the stage.
Luc was back in Perth and the scouts came to see Andy Vlahoff.
The coach comes out to visit me here, a guy called Gary Colson. I told him about my friend Luc, and I told Luc to meet me down at the basketball centre.
I don't know why he asked me to come along, maybe to expose me to them. Maybe he needed a foil for him to look good against, because I was still just bouncing around having a bit of fun.
And I walk in with Gary Colson, and Luc's just come off the beach. He's in his boardies, barefoot, 7 foot, 16-year-old. Gary Colson's jaw dropped, pretty much forgot about me and went, I need this guy.
Gary Colson eventually offered him a scholarship, and the rest is history. Then Luc went to New Mexico for a college career.
It was sort of a stupid curiosity and a lust for adventure and a free ticket to America. And I saw the movie Animal House and toga parties looked like fun, and I just thought, great, I'm going to go and have a go at all that. The main thing in Albuquerque sports-wise is the university basketball team, the University of New Mexico Lobos.
The biggest Lobo of them all was having the hardest time. Big 7-foot freshman Luc Longley admits he's a little bit out of condition.
Oh, I suppose I'm just lazy. No, I think this has a lot to do with fitness. We didn't have a very good team attitude that game. We didn't play very well.
There's some footage somewhere of a journalist asking me why I'd had a bad practice when I first got there. And I said, oh, I'm lazy, I suppose, ha, 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 like that was my big joke. So they crucified me a bit for that.
When Luc was recruited by New Mexico, he was very green. He didn't know the game very well, but he has really good hands for a guy his size. He can shoot the ball, he can pass the ball, and he can defend.
By the time I realised that I actually really loved playing basketball, I was on the Olympic team in '88. That's when I went, hang on, this is real. Like, I actually could be pretty good at this.
If the names Luc Longley and Andrew Vlahoff don't mean anything to you now, they soon will. They have just been selected in the Australian Boomers team to go to the Seoul Olympic Games.
The '88 Olympics were a turning point for Luc. He was in, I think, about the second year of college at New Mexico, and I picked him in that team. He was only 19 at the time, very controversial. A lot of people hadn't seen him, didn't know him. '88 was good because they played with the innocence of youth.
Yeah, it was joyous. We finished 4th, which was Australia's highest ever finish. But yeah, it was clear to everyone that probably Luc was on a different trajectory to anyone else.
When Luc went back to New Mexico after the Olympics, we all sat down and mapped out a way to go for him to go to the NBA.
I just felt this massive boost of confidence and energy, and I poured all that into my basketball. I cared about my teammates more than I cared about winning. So therefore winning became how to reward them. So that's part of, I think, what drove me to be good.
It was certainly an intense time. The Lobos, the New Mexico Lobos, their college team are the biggest show in town. Luc was their biggest star, and he was this 7'2" Australian with flowing red hair and a different perspective on basketball and on the world. I think they could feel that. So he was a big star and a very big fish in a very small pond.
I'm in the papers all the time, and every time I did something, they'd go mad. My confidence just went through the roof, and I can talk to girls all of a sudden. I remember spotting Kelly, who ended up being my wife, and thinking she was the prettiest girl I'd ever seen, and plucking up the courage to talk to her.
Kelly had a hairdressing business, and she grew up in Albuquerque. They were right into each other straight away.
He got my phone number from my friend and called my house for 3 weeks, and he came over for dinner. And that night we went to the pit where the Lobos played, and we went to my salon where I cut off his mullet, the famous red mullet. I was like, this is not right. But his accent, his height, I just fell.
She was very tough, so she was tougher than me, like she had a real street smart to her about her that was attractive to me because I didn't have that. And she was independent and she was confident, and why wouldn't you fall in love with that?
After Luke made the decision in his third year at college to go to the NBA, I think it really all happened. He got stronger, more serious about the game.
In basketball, there is one league which towers over every other league, and that's the NBA. And at that point, the NBA was becoming a global phenomenon.
I started getting told that there was NBA scouts in the stands, that they were looking at me. I mean, and I had been playing great and beating guys who end up in the NBA, and so I knew by then I believed in myself.
One NBA scout claims that the 7-footer with the flowing red hair has the potential to be Australia's best chance of becoming a millionaire in the lucrative National Basketball Association in the United States.
It's almost like an algorithm, you know. You put in the right variables, 7 foot, smart, strong, good guy, high IQ, you're going to get drafted.
And the 1991 NBA draft has moved to the big arena here at Madison Square Garden. More than
the Americans always make a big party around the draft because it's the introduction of new blood into their sport. And the way the NBA historically creates their level playing field is to offer the best possible athlete coming through the college system to the worst possible teams.
All the players go to New York, and there's a big thing in Madison Square Garden and media and attention.
With the 7th pick in the 1991 NBA draft, the Minnesota Timberwolves select Luc Longley from the University of New Mexico.
Being picked 7th basically, in a sense, says he was the 7th best player in American collegiate basketball that year. So that's an impressive acknowledgement.
Nobody from Australia has ever really made it big or made it in the NBA.
That opened up the eyes of the Australians because we tended to regard the NBA as something they played on another planet. It was out beyond our reach.
When I got to Minnesota, we were bad. We won 17 games out of, I think, 82 the first year I was there. And that was the most miserable year of my life. Hated it.
I moved up there and it was the frozen tundra. It was so cold. I'd never seen that kind of cold. And left my family, my friends, my business.
Teammates, I got on with a few of them, but there wasn't a lot of love in the locker room. It was competitive, which is good. Competitive is fine, but I didn't feel it at all. I wasn't enjoying it. People don't share the ball. People don't defend as well for each other. And all that sort of stuff was what really appealed to me more than whether or not we won or lost, funnily enough.
What's up, man? You in your own movie again? What's up, man? Look at all this camera time. Come on, share my brothers, man. This is Crocodile Longley.
They weren't sure about his Australian laid-back attitude, and I think it took a bit of his confidence.
Luc Longley, you like Luc? No! What do you think of Luc Longley?
Well, let's see. Clumsy comes to mind right offhand.
He shows his emotion. And I could see him. He was running down the court and it was heavy. I knew that he was just really hating it.
My game from college didn't translate in the NBA. I hated it, but they had given me $1 million signing bonus. I was the first Australian to make it. I had to succeed. I went back at it and sort of redesigned myself a little bit, and I said, no, that wasn't good enough. Let's have another run at this. Which tools shall I pick up and beat myself up with? And so I re-engaged in the weight room and even watched videotape of how the good guys were doing it. Picked up a few more tools, you know, developed a little hook shot that I didn't have. I started to play with more confidence. And the general manager of the team, Trader Jack they called him, because he's always trading players. So he was rubbing his hands together saying, great, we can finally get something for this Australian kid who hasn't been very good because he's finding some juice and we can trade for him.
We watched him through his rookie season. I liked his game, I liked his size, I liked the fact that he was a really good passer, that he was a teammate. Yeah, it was his bulk more than anything else, his size. He's a big guy.
In the NBA, you can get traded any time before the middle of the season. You get traded, you get a call from your agent, you've got to be in the next town the next day, you call your wife, pack up the house, and you fly to wherever it is. It happens quick.
We got the phone call. We've got good news and bad news. But the bad news is you're being traded. The good news is you're being traded to Chicago, to the Bulls. I think I was about 4 or 5 months pregnant with Claire, and Luc was on a flight and gone.
Got on a plane the next morning, flew to Chicago, super excited, and got to practice and straight away felt like I was home. They shared the ball and they were genuinely excited when you did well.
They needed him for what he could bring, and he was able to provide what they needed. He would absorb the blows physically from the other team, and I think that's what the Bulls needed most.
Strong rebound, spins. Nice drop step by Luc.
People ask me, well, how did you end up winning 3 championships? Well, I got traded to Chicago. It was the first part, and lots of lucky stuff after that.
About my career. At 219 centimetres or 7 feet 2, Luc Longley was hardly intimidated by some members of the press gallery.
My wife is a lot happier to be around me since I've been with Chicago, mostly because winning basketball games is a lot more fun than losing. When I got to Chicago, they had just won 3 world championships in a row, and Michael Jordan, who we'll call MJ from now on, his dad died and he had an existential moment and decided to play baseball. So when I got there, it was a Michael Jordan-less team. Obviously, he's never going to be as good without the best player in the world, but we're still pretty competitive. Still with Phil Jackson coaching, still with Scottie Pippen at the helm.
Me and Luc really bonded. He's a bit of a joker to some degree, like myself, so me and him was able to hit it right off. The only unusual thing that struck me about him was his accent. That became something for me to get used to a bit.
You know, he comes to Chicago and plays for one of the great coaches ever, and Phil Jackson, and now it starts to make sense. Phil loved Luc, and Luc adored Phil. I mean, there was an instant connection.
I think Luc looked up to him as a father figure.
I always felt like it's hard for a big man to be a part of basketball because somewhere in the back of your mind you feel like, oh, just because I'm big, I'm a basketball player, rather than proficient or skilled. But Luc had a lot more than he's willing to admit. He was very adept at what he needed to do to be part of the team. He was a pass-first guy, which was important.
Here's the give and go. Longley to Harper. It's beautiful.
Phil was talking my language and talking calmly and slowly, not yelling at me like all the other coaches had. He managed to make me believe that I was great. So he put grease on the tracks, if you like.
You can't tell Luc to do something. You can't say, Luc, do this, because he's going to be resistant against commands. You have to tell him, Luc, tell yourself you can do this. And you know, that became one of the methods that I used to talk to Luc about maybe scoring, being more aggressive.
We started to get rumours that MJ was thinking about coming back. He started hanging around at practice a little bit. First it was just watching from the gallery upstairs. You could see him hanging out up there. I had never spoken to him. And suddenly he's at practice, fighting with Scotty and barking orders, and he wasn't even part of the team, he just came in and took over practice.
When Jordan decides to come back, you know, with his celebrity and his name and his fame and everything, it became the biggest story in the United States. Might have been one of the biggest stories in the world.
Today, Michael Jordan, at age 32, tries to accomplish what no one else truly has in team sports history.
I was anxious to understand who my teammates were. My mindset was to go, try to get back and win. So you have to be prepared. You got to be ready to play.
When Michael comes back, it's amped up tenfold. Just the intensity and the awareness of what's coming. So I think it took some time for Luc to adapt and adjust.
Michael in the air, dumped underneath. Longley goes up, missed it.
Luc and other players, they felt like that they were walking on eggshells.
He just had all these sharp edges, like some sort of a ninja star.
You would assume that everybody had the same mentality as I had. Strive for perfection each and every time you step on the basketball court. But unfortunately, everybody don't have that same mentality. But I had a mission, I wanted them to understand what it took to win, and winning has a price. And I'm pretty sure there were times they were not happy with me. But, as a leader, you sometimes you're not going to be well liked. You're not going to be, but you have to pull them along.
Michael was a demanding teammate. He wanted you to be as aggressive as he was. Second was not good enough. It just wasn't for him.
And the next thing that happened was, we'd lose a couple of games and they start looking around for people to blame. So I get blamed for a loss here, blamed for a loss there. Is Luc good enough? Can he do it? All that sort of stuff, which I was curious about as well. Am I good enough for this team? Like, how am I going to make this work? So search around for more tools, hammer myself into a different shape.
Michael rode him a lot, pushed him and cajoled him and criticised him, and with not a lot of encouragement, just like toughen up and you got a job to do your job, and this is what I need you to do if we're going to win.
He may not like this story. In '98, we were playing the Utah Jazz. The first quarter ends. Luc has 12 points, 4 blocks, and 4 rebounds. And I go to Luc, I say, that's how you fucking play, man. You do that, we dominate. We up by 16 at the end of the game. Luc had 12 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 blocks. We're winning by 16, we lose by 15. And I just looked at Luc and I said, you know what, Luc? That is the last time I'm gonna give you a compliment in the middle of the game.
There was times where Mike would get pissed off at Luc, and Luc feels deeply, and that disappointment, of letting down a teammate, it affected him.
I knew he was capable. We all felt he was capable, but you have to be capable every single night for us to maintain the success. So I pushed him. Obviously I did, and verbally, I would challenge him in certain situations where I felt like, look, you're not doing what we expect you to do. It was a mindset that I felt like Luc had to learn, and I think he did learn.
He'll say, oh, Luc wasn't this and Luc wasn't that, so I made him this and I made him that. And I'll say, well, may or may not be true. I might not have been a killer like MJ was, but you don't need 12 killers. You need a group of humans that appreciate, understand, push and pull, work together.
Michael's point is, we won, so it worked. We did it my way and it worked. If we did it your way, it might not have worked.
The Bulls needed Michael Jordan to be successful, no doubt in my mind.
MJ. Oh, he did it! Oh, Michael shakes the finger!
I was still that kid from Freo who was reshaping himself. And MJ was 3-time world champion, best player on the planet, had his own shoes. And there was me and there was him, and somewhere between us was the rest of the team, and we had to figure out how to be together. And that wasn't his priority, but it was mine. I'm deeply thankful to MJ for showing me how to be a better basketballer, for compensating for my weaknesses with his brilliance. You don't have to love a bloke to be on his team, to care about him, to play basketball together. I didn't love MJ. I thought MJ was difficult and unnecessarily harsh on his teammates and probably on himself. And I think, I just didn't enjoy being around him that much. And that was cool. It was cool with MJ and it was cool with me. There was at the end of the day, we found a way to respect each other on the court and to coexist, and that was cool. When we were winning championships, obviously everyone was in on the marketing thing. Even people were doing babushka dolls. And then one day we found the one with me on as the big dog. Usually had MJ on the outside. So we grabbed this one. It's getting old now, like the varnish is coming off. I think it's a spitting image, don't you? And then, so if we line us up in order of importance, then MJ, of course, is pretty important. Scotty, do that. Make Scotty the next most important.
We had a very good relationship, both on and off the basketball court, and that's just how we evolved and became friends for now almost going on 30 years.
So that's Dennis. He was having an egg yolk hair day. Obviously, he had lots of wild hair days. I loved Dennis. I tended to roll with Dennis a bit after the game and ended up in some places that I wouldn't have otherwise ended up in, which I put in the life experience bag. But my favourite is a little baby Steve. Little precious Steve. Hello, Steve. Put Steve up here with me. He would like to be there. There you go.
Luke and I hit it off right away. We would barbecue at each other's homes and our kids would play together, and it was just an absolutely beautiful time of life.
That's our order of importance. No, you can go there. There we go.
So how did it really go in real life back then?
The real social hierarchy was obviously something like that. These are all jumbled down here, and these are the three rock stars, and they were. I mean, these guys are Hall of Fame great players. And the rest of us down here found nice roles to win championships, and that's the truth of it.
Luc was a really important piece of the jigsaw puzzle that was the Chicago Bulls. I mean, Michael Jordan was obviously the most important part, but Luc was the starting centre, and you remember there's only 5 people on the court. Luc's job was to guard the opposing monster.
Again, Longley, the only man on Shaquille.
Shaquille O'Neal was one of the most dominating big men in our game. So it was important that we tried to have some guys on the floor that could really meet Shaq's intensity.
I loved wrestling Shaq, and I got lots of cracked ribs and busted teeth as a result. But I loved it, and Phil and MJ and Pip and all those guys understood that made us good.
There's an intimidation factor that goes into basketball, and Luc was a force that held his own. He could take a blow and just keep going, keep playing, steady, reliable, wanted to pass, wanted to help everybody else be better.
His strength was he could shoot. You know, he was very smart, good passer. He knew how to position himself well. He had the skill set.
He made our team better, you know, his ability to see the floor and make passes.
Release last Wednesday.
Hi.
Hey guys. Hey.
He was important to the team and to each individual within the team. So he had a lot of really strong relationships, and that made him a natural connector for the group.
There's Daddy.
Merry Christmas, Claire.
The teammates and their wives and the kids, that was our family.
We've got a partner.
Hosting people, bringing people over, having a Barbie, just opening up his house. That was all part of the ambiance that Luc provided to the team.
What are we going to do? You throw a few bones in the dark.
Go, horsey.
To see these little girls together, best friends, you know, running around in their pigtails and dresses and enjoying company and wine, and in the midst of playing for this iconic franchise in an era where we're winning championships. It was the time of our lives.
There was a real strong community that built around that. Michael wasn't totally included in it because of his isolation, but everybody else was invited.
I wish, you know, I could have, you know, laid back and enjoyed it as much as everybody else, but that didn't guarantee us success. You know, that didn't say we're gonna win. You know, so I had to do what I had to do.
It was an amazing time to be part of the Bulls during that run. Every town, there'd be hundreds of people outside the hotel when we would arrive. It felt like a traveling rock show. We had so many different people in our locker room from one night to the next, whether it was, Eddie Vedder or Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton.
Australia's basketball.
It was Beatlemania. Anywhere Luke went, there was crowds forming, there was people calling out. Everywhere the team went, they were just absolutely mobbed.
We would go into hotels often through the kitchens and up through the kitchen elevators because there'd be too many people outside, and you'd use aliases. I mean, I was Norman Gunston for 2 years.
You couldn't even make a friend. Once they found out that Luc played for the Bulls, it was impossible. You couldn't trust anyone to be true.
It's so difficult to win an NBA title because it really is a marathon. You get through the regular season just to position yourselves for the playoffs, and then it's like 2 months of incredible stress. So during the 3-year championship run, it just got harder and harder each season.
Luc Longley is the first Australian to win an American NBA championship, his team beating Seattle today.
The first championship, we were just on fire and we were fresh and no one knew what to do with us.
Luc Longley takes a unique place in Australian sporting history.
I hope the people in Australia are, getting some of this footage and can see how much fun we're having, because it's, it's a first, hopefully not a last. It's great. Second one, people figured us out a bit. Our bodies were a little more beaten up. It was a bit harder, but still we expected to win that.
Not since the Boston Celtics has any NBA team reigned as supreme as the Chicago Bulls. And there for the second successive year was Australian Luc Longley.
The third one was really hard. We were really beaten up. We were starting to get a bit scratchy at each other because we'd been living in this intense hub together for however long. And it was made clear to us by management that this was our last season together. So it got coined by Phil that we would call this the last dance. We've had this amazing run. This is all you're going to get. This is not going any further. Michael's not coming back. This is the last dance.
The NBA asked me if I would agree to having a television producer, a camera guy, travel with the team for that season because they anticipated what might happen.
This is Kelly, my wife. That's when we opened up the locker room in our homes and that to this camera crew.
They're just meeting the girls. Do you know any of these guys? Have you seen them around before? Andy?
Which ended up being the footage for the last dance.
By the third year, it felt like we were running on fumes, and we barely hung on.
We're not hunting anymore. We're being hunted.
We were sort of maxed out as a unit, and so we literally just crawled across the line against Utah in that third championship.
Jordan, open. The Chicago Bulls have won their 6th NBA championship.
Third one felt like I gave the last bit of my body for it. I played my best basketball of my life for it. Really, after that championship, I wasn't trying to take selfies with the celebrities in the locker room. I wasn't out on the court high-fiving the fans. I just found a quiet corner and just wanted to own that one for me. These are my 3 championship rings. And some people play their whole lives, don't get one. I stumbled into 3. Thank you, MJ. Thank you, MJ.
Once we understood how the players were on that team, it clicked. Ultimately, we got where we needed to go. I mean, it was teamwork. It wasn't a one band. It was teamwork. They made me better as well.
Yeah, of course, when I look at the rings, it's cool. I have a lot of good memories and it changed my life. And the rings themselves are gaudy and ugly. But the whole experience was kind of gaudy and ugly as well, so they're perfect.
Even though we knew the breakup was coming, when it did hit, It was really sort of bizarre, you know, to all of a sudden be heading to different teams. We all signed with different teams.
Because of this bull situation, he ended up getting, you know, a fabulous contract with the Phoenix Suns.
I did sign a big contract with Phoenix, which I struggled to live up to because my ankle was going bad, but also just that there wasn't that magic around the group.
Many of us struggled to find a new role with our teams. I know that was the case for Luc and Phoenix, and we all sort of longed for the Chicago days where we had been living this incredible experience. So it was a tough time for us.
I think Luc suffered from the expectations. They want you to be who they need you to be, not who you are. And so they needed Luc to be, you know, a big center who averaged, you know, 18 points and 10 rebounds, and that's not who he was.
Claire, stand next to Lil for just a second.
I think we were just in shock and awe that everything was over in Chicago, and I think Luc struggled a lot. I think we were only there a year. Bought a nice house. The girls learned to swim, and then we were off to New York.
New York, same sort of thing. It was quick turnover, new guys, it just didn't have the same vibe, and I never really felt the same way about it. And I was embarrassed that I was playing badly.
He just never got back to being the player that he was once he left Chicago. It was very difficult, and injuries started to really take its toll.
His ankle was bone on bone, and it was hard seeing him, you know, go through so much therapy and pain.
Ankle specialist said, "We can't believe you're even running on this. You should stop playing straight away." I still had 2 or 3 years on my contract, and that was just devastating to me. Not just because my career was over, but that it was over in a moment where I was really not enjoying basketball and not being able to perform very well, and suddenly it was just all over.
We left New York and never went back. We were going back to Australia, and that was it.
As I understand in the NBA, the contracts are guaranteed. So if a player is injured and can't continue, their contract is honoured.
Longley still has 3 years left of his $60 million contract with the Knicks and will be paid out if NBA doctors rule him unfit to play.
Luc was given the option to take an insurance payout, but the proviso was that he could not play basketball ever again.
Not being able to, you know, function as an NBA player at that level, at least a hollow feeling in you.
The end of my career really felt like a fizz after those high years in Chicago, and that fizz hurt. Definitely, when I came home, I was deeply sad, and I was depressed about it. Depressed about the way it ended. I just felt embarrassed. I didn't feel good about the end of my career at all.
He's no longer an elite sportsman. He's no longer at the centre of the whirlwind. He's no longer making that massive amount of money. He's injured, he's home, and he's also, again, probably for the first time since he was 15, the only giant in the room.
You had to be a warrior. You had to be tough. You had to be strong. And that's very difficult once you retire, because now you're not a warrior.
I'll end up learning how to be competitive and being prepared to hit that guy to get what I want. There's no doubt that it changed me. It would change anyone.
I think the hardest thing for Luc was building that armour that he needed to survive in that world. And then that armour, as you come out, what do you do with that?
There's a competitive drive that we have to somehow figure out how to channel it a different way when we leave the game.
In basketball, the way to get better is to look critically at where you fail, what you do wrong, what you can do better. And so over the course of 20 years, I got quite good at that. And so you go to bed at night thinking, I'm going to do this better, I'm going to do that better. And if you're not careful, you go to bed at night thinking, I'm no good, or I'm not measuring up, I'm not good enough. But I think it eroded me a lot as a person on the way through. So that when I finished playing, it was really hard to put down that athlete's mind, to stop criticising myself, to stop looking for my own weaknesses. What happened was, to a certain extent, that athlete's mind started panning around looking for other things to work on. My ex-wife Kelly would have probably say that it got pointed at her a bit, or even the kids sometimes, or friendships, and myself mostly.
I just couldn't live under someone telling me what to do all the time.
How are you feeling today?
I was being picked apart like he was. I would rather be my own person than being picked apart.
It was pretty clear that his marriage was in trouble, and that was very painful to watch. And when that all went to bits, it was a very dark time for Luc.
Level ground.
They had a good divorce. They stayed civil. They shared the care of their children, and they did it well, but never easy.
Did you hear that, Luc?
We've always been amicable. We've always gotten along. I know that he was the best dad and the best human being, and I saw him go through the hardest times, and he's a great man.
The only real shining light in my life at that stage was the kids, and I put a lot of energy into the kids. Oh, Claire, the elbow and the shin. Played around, spent lots of money on boats, tried to find happiness in things, bought some nice cars, tried to have a bit of fun, but never found anything to really plug back into and really make mine again.
Going from being mid-career, highly successful, to being retired at 31. In some ways that sounds glorious, right? But also, all your friends are working. Who do you hang out with? How do you spend your time? How do you enjoy that?
I definitely didn't find purpose. I knew that I wanted to not do something in basketball. I just fell out of love with it. I didn't want to be around it. It's like an old girlfriend, Just didn't feel a love.
Luc had this long period where he was alone and lonely, and then he fell in love. And he fell in love with a tiny person, which was comical, as love generally is.
The first time I laid eyes on him was at John Curtin Senior High School. And I can remember he was sort of sliding down the handrail of the stairs. And I remember we caught eyes, and I just thought, wow, he's big. They'll curl up and do lots of magic stuff.
They're huge.
Well, they'll be suitable for someone like you.
I knew Anna growing up. As a teenager, I went to high school with her and she played in a band. I used to go to the pubs on the weekend and watch her sing. No, I'll work in my small bits of squid angle, but...
Anna and Luc getting together is kind of a lovely, cute story. I mean, they both had earlier marriages and they had beautiful kids. They've kind of known each other all their lives, except they had very different lives for 20 years.
Hey, Google, volume up.
She's the only thing around here that does what he says. It's funny because we were friends. It was a bit of an awkward start. I suddenly realised I liked him. I never knew that I even had feelings for him, but I was like, oh, this is a wonderful man sitting right in front of me. And I thought, wow, he could just get snapped up like that.
It was just a friendship that blossomed into more. Yeah, I don't know. She's just good for me. She's a good balance for me. And she's helped me shift back towards who I feel like I really am.
I'm the feeder, and I'm just trying to make you more unattractive to other women.
The first time I met Anna was at our family home.
Keep going. It's working well.
At the time, it was just Dad, Claire and I living there. And she came in, and she's a pretty bright personality. She's easy to go along with. And Jackson and Elsie, they were very similar ages. Elsie's my age, Jackson's my sister's age. So it really became a Brady Bunch situation.
We ended up moving in with Luc when
was about 12. We all got on really well.
And everything was just so perfect. It was so perfect. And then I wake up in the middle of the night and you can hear everyone fire.
The converted warehouse was already well alight when fire crews arrived about 3 o'clock this morning.
We just woke up to lots of loud banging, basically. It sounded like someone was in the kitchen throwing pans around.
Luc Longley could only watch as fire destroyed the Montreal Street building.
I was asleep and heard a bang, an explosion, and it was already on fire. And got the kids out.
Everything went, nothing was left. It was awful.
I felt like, here I'm going to start again. Like I've started again after basketball, I started again after Kelly, I have to start again after the fire. I felt like I was always starting again. I was really at the bottom of my own emotional sort of reservoir. And the Boomers came to town for a training camp and the coach said, Luke, will you come down and just watch practice and tell me what you think? I've got a couple of guys I'd like you to look at. And I never forget walking into the gym and being almost embarrassed and almost like, what am I doing here? I don't belong. This is my old stomping ground. That's not me now. And by the end of a week of going to that practice, I felt reinvigorated and topped up again, and like I'd connected with something that was important to me that I'd been not connecting with for a long time.
I'm very happy to see Luke, get a job as an assistant coach.
One guy who I really helped, a guy named Aaron Baines, I really enjoyed coaching him, and that relationship, along with the relationship with basketball, just kind of lifted me out of where I was.
Luke's first and foremost priority was to work with me and try and see if he could calm me down a little bit. And, from day one, we kind of clicked. He's not coming at you and attacking you. He's trying to help you and build you up into a better person, both on and off the court.
I tried to be for Aaron what Phil was for me, and that's ambitious, but that's what I tried to do.
You could just see that weight lifted from him. I think it turned around. I think he could have gone into that dark spiral that often sports people do of not having the thing they worked so hard in their life. Now he's working with the Sydney Kings and he's still got that.
You're going to roll, pretend you find a body, hit Archie for a jumper, then Dave's going to feed it straight into you for a finish. I'm just a generalist with this team. I'm a consultant. There it is, mate. Just get loose. I didn't want to be around the game for a long time, and I don't think I realised how much I missed it.
If you're having difficulties, the next thing happens, the big fella walks in the door and says, let's have a talk. And he can do it because everyone respects who he is and who he was.
Do you feel any pressure being named Jordan and playing basketball?
Yeah,
every day.
I can't get out of bed.
It's a little bit ironic, but basketball has ended up filling some sort of a void for me in later life that I feel like basketball created in earlier life. Did you hear the bench more yesterday from the court? Did you think the bench was more engaged?
Yeah.
Basketball sort of brought me back to being whole again a little bit, and in my mind I'd like to get back to where I started the story, which is as a gentle, slightly alternative, giving person.
When The Last Dance dropped on Netflix last year, everyone was talking about the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan all over again. But where the hell was Luc Longley?
There you go, Claire. Oh, I'm gone.
I saw you.
I missed it.
To watch this documentary with great anticipation and to not see yourself in it, that's tough. And I know it hurt him.
There you go. Stop. Oh, Spotto. Sitting there on the couch and watching episode after episode where I wasn't in it, I was like, yeah, I was bummed about that. I didn't expect to be a heavy feature in it because they hadn't interviewed me and stuff, but I did expect to be in it more than I was. Oh, there's Spotto again. Look at that, twice in one day.
You want your family to be able to appreciate it, which mine did. I watched it with my kids, and but I thought about Luke's omission from it, and how much he lost from that.
I think the worst part for Luke was that the phone was ringing all day, all night. Everyone wanted to know, why aren't you in the, how are you feeling right now? Like drama, drama, drama.
I didn't say anything in the media because I hadn't finished seeing it and I didn't know what to say. And I ended up changing my phone number because it was just overwhelming. I was overwhelmed with interest. It was like revisiting the whole thing again, where suddenly I needed an alias. I needed to go in through the kitchen again. There you go, Claire, there's a sighting. There it is. I think we're up to 4 now, is that right?
Yeah.
4 sightings. Why I'm not in the doco, I don't really know, to be honest. The self-deprecating Australian in me thinks it's because I'm not that exciting. He had suits to match his Ferraris, do you remember that? I was playing a huge role, but it wasn't one that was that sexy, to be honest. There's so many beautiful, bright, shiny stars out there to focus on that, it makes sense to me, but that story wasn't about me. Makes perfect sense.
There's only so much, that they could cover. And Luc was all the way in Australia. He was difficult to reach in terms of getting an interview.
There was a lot of people that, was a part of what happened in the 90s that, probably got left out. But I felt bad that Luc wasn't involved.
Skinny, isn't he? Look how skinny he is.
I can understand why Australia would say, well, why wouldn't we include Luc? And we probably should have. And that was, I guess, if you look back and say if I could change anything, that's probably what I could have changed.
It's a great trip down memory lane. That's the great thing. I've got my criticisms of this doco, but generally it's been a great thing. I'm talking about it again, thinking about it again, people asking questions about it again. That's a good thing,
I feel proud of him.
Yeah, good. It's a long time ago.
Someone had to try and write this story up, and they excluded people, unfortunately, that had a big part. But the memory's ours. We have a story that's connected us 25 years ago, and it still connects us now. So yeah, I'm glad that you have taken the opportunity to give a little shout out to Luc and what his role was.
That was all happening at the same time as I was making my decision to fuse my ankle, which was as a direct result of what was going on in the doco. So there was this sort of a loop for me of, here I am sitting there with my about to be fused ankle, watching why my ankle needs to be fused.
I'm actually really surprised he took so long to actually have his ankle operation. He put up with that for 20 years, and there was a lot of pain connected to that ankle.
Hey. So I'm recovering from my ankle fusion. I'm not allowed to go home until it's 2 weeks old, which it is tomorrow. Thanks, bro. Fusion is very permanent and it's a major deal, which is what I've done.
Does it feel like a consequence? Do you feel like you're wearing the career out?
That's the strong bit, is it's such a clear emblem of the cost of doing business.
Man, oh man, it's changed our life. It's he's so much happier and freer, and he can walk without having any pain. He carried that for so long. I feel another chili jam coming on, Luke.
There's going to be plenty, isn't there? I live on an old farm down south of Perth on the beach. There's fish, there's surf. We grow our own vegetables. It's peaceful. It's lovely, and I love it down there. Some of these ones are getting a bit tired.
Well, he's had this place for a long time, so I think he was 21 when he bought it with a stack of the money that he got from some trading cards.
Life is so different for him down in Denmark on his farm. He's really secluded down there.
That community, they have never, ever asked anything of me. And when I walk down the street, I get a hello, Luke, but there's never been any fanfare. They're all farmers. They probably either don't know or don't care, and I love that about it.
Luke's a quiet guy. This land and place suits him more than I can imagine being a rock star basketballer for the rest of his life.
I think Luc, for a long time, was reluctant to sort of step back into the legend of what he did and what he was a part of.
The Chicago Bulls have won their 6th NBA championship, and it's their second three-peat.
he had a great, great career, and a career that most would, fantasize about having. So I consider Luc real fortunate.
Luc was the starting centre on the team that won 3 straight NBA championships. You cannot take that away from him.
I don't really understand why I've sort of avoided it for a long time and didn't really engage with it. I think it just, coming out of it just hurt. Coming out of it hurt, I wanted away from it. And now I'm digging being around basketball again, and so I'm keen to talk about it.
Good. We're going to have you supposed to film me coming in? Yeah.
Interestingly, MJ and I, our exchanges now are really friendly and warm. I mean, I think that now that we're not playing together, there's room for that.
You're a busy man, Michael. Why did you agree to take time out of your schedule to do this interview for Luc?
He matters to me. Yeah, he does matter to me, and his story needs to be told. Sure, I mean, there's some good and there's some bad, but that's all a part of life. You're going to have friends that you have good and bad things about, but we went through the trenches. We shared a lot, we competed together, and I would take him any day of the week if I had to go through a competition again. If you asked me to do it all over again, there's no way I would leave Luc Longley off my team. No way possible, because he mattered. He had an impact on me.
Wow, go MJ.
He made me better as a player, as a person.
Wow, wowee. That's something. There's a notion in Japanese art and life that nothing should be quite perfect. And I like that idea because I wasn't perfect. I didn't plan to be the first Australian or to get to the NBA. I didn't plan to be the first Australian to win a championship. It unfolded in front of me, and at the time, that was just what I did, and it seemed great. I've never really carried on about it much, and I don't really want to anymore either, but I can't help but be proud of it,